All right, I think we are live. Hello, hello. Welcome back to a Purpose and Pixie Dust podcast interview. I am Lindsay Dollinger, and I am so excited for you guys to meet Renae O'Neill. I met Renae. Oh my gosh, I don't even know actually where we met. Somewhere in the Instagram realm, maybe, perhaps, or another group that we were in. I'm not even sure. It's like that with entrepreneurs online now. But anyway, I instantly connected with Renae. And I know you guys are going to absolutely love everything that she has to share today. So, Renae, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, what you do, all the things.
Oh, thank you so much, Lindsay. I'm so honored to be here. So thanks for having me. So I'm Renae O'Neill. I'm a mum of two and a life and business coach for mums. And I live in Tasmania in Australia, so a long way from where you are, Lindsay. But
And
that's the beauty of what we do, isn't it? It's like we can
Mhm.
connect with people all across the world, which is something that I just absolutely love. So yes, I love to help mums really start and grow a successful business alongside motherhood. It's something I'm really passionate about. I think that all women need to be living a life that they're fulfilled in, they're passionate about. And I know that you and I have a very similar mission in what we're doing. So I love that we've connected and we're on the mic today.
Yes, yes. Like I already mentioned, like I feel like there were so many things when we were chatting. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like so similar for with me or my story. And so I just know that this is going to be an amazing interview. So, how did you get started? Like, how were you one day like, I'm going to be a business coach for moms? Like, tell us that story.
Yeah, it's so funny, isn't it? Because often we end up somewhere where we don't necessarily always expect ourselves to end up. So I think being in business is something I've done for a really long time. I've had all sorts of businesses. I've owned a bricks and mortar bridal store. I've done a little bit of multi-level marketing. Like I've done so many different things. And I think when I became a mum, that's when things really kind of shifted and changed for me, where I all of a sudden was like, I don't want to go to a 9 to 5 job. I want to have the time, flexibility, and freedom so I can be the mum I want to be and, be there for my kids when I want to be. And so things started kind of changing and evolving from there, where I started to really take business, I guess, a little bit more probably seriously, where I was like, I need to make this really work for me. And, as I slowly went through and transitioned through all these changes that we go through in life and in motherhood, I really started being passionate about personal development. I think, I had some struggles when I became a mom. I had postnatal anxiety, I had postnatal depression. Like I had all of these things that I had gone through, and I had gone through my own personal transformations that, I really became passionate about personal development. So I went and got a coaching certification. I went into the world of coaching, and it was, I guess, more life coaching at that stage. But I noticed that a lot of clients were coming to me for business, and, they were wanting business advice and how do I get a business off the ground as a mom? And it kind of naturally evolved into them becoming business coaching. And that's sort of the space that I've been in for a little while now. So it's really interesting when you stop and you look back and reflect on your journey. You're like, this is where I've ended up, which feels like the place I'm meant to be. It feels like this is my true passion and something I'm really loving. But it's interesting because had you have said this is where I'd be 10 years ago, I would have probably been like, no. Like, it's just interesting how these things happen, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just like a natural progression, and I think that's what I love so much is I always ask that story to guests when I have them on because I love to hear the journey and see how that has changed. Because I went to school to be a teacher, and I'm still a teacher, and it's very different. Like if you would have said, like 10 years ago to me that I would be have a podcast and be going live and doing these things, I'd be like, yeah, no, you're crazy. Actually,
Yeah.
no, because a lot of this stuff didn't exist, to be fair, right? Like 10 years ago. Well, I mean, I guess Facebook was around then, maybe like 20 years ago. But, a lot of the stuff, just this realm wasn't there largely. So I think that's a really cool thing too, to realize like we're changing with the times too. Um, and that's just a really fun thing. So I love that you started with life coaching. I wondered because I feel like the two can be so intertwined. Like it's
Mm.
really hard to have a successful business if you don't have things together in your life, or you have something else in your personal life like pulling you away from that. Do you find that as well with your clients?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely feel like in my world with working with mums in particular, your worlds are intertwined. I mean, there is no segregation between necessarily life and business because there's sort of those blurred lines. And so I definitely, when I work with my clients, it's more of a holistic approach of looking at how are things in your life, how are you in your everyday life, and how are you showing up, but then how are things in your business, and looking at both of those aspects because they're very much, they make us up as a whole human being. I mean, if you ask somebody a bit about themselves, they'll often describe, that they might be a wife or a mum or whatever it looks like, but then they'll also put in their career title or their business as well. So like it's one in the same. And so I definitely think that there are times when, we might have a season of life where something's going on in our personal lives, and that does have a little bit of a ripple effect into our businesses, and how we're showing up in business and the success we're creating in business, that has a flow-on effect into our lives as well. So I definitely feel like they're one in the same. And when we're looking at anything that we're doing coaching wise, I think if it's business, it still has a flow-on effect to life stuff as well. So yeah. And I mean, I still call myself a life and business coach because I believe that the work I do helps both of those aspects.
Yeah. And I think for me at first, because I started with the business coaching. And
Mm.
so when I was talking with clients and then they would bring in some of the more personal life stuff, it was very like in my mind, like I'm like, oh, whoa, like this is not like it was almost something that I had to like get used to. Um, Even though I knew that, the life and the business, intertwined, like you said, to me, I was almost like trying to separate them. And so
Mm.
it has been a big learning process for me. Like, okay, now we also have to address these other things as well. Like your relationships and finances and all these things tie into, because you're not able to show up like the business owner that you want to be if all that stuff's not together.
Mm. Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? It's funny because you and I have almost had opposite
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah.
I've gone life coaching and then naturally evolved into the business side of things, and you've almost had the opposite way around. So it's interesting just to, I know that when I have had a business coach, and I mean, I'm always working with a business coach, but there are times where we're talking about things that actually aren't business related, but it affects the business. So and showing up in particular, how we're showing up in our everyday life
Yeah.
will have a flow-on effect into our businesses as well. If we're not feeling confident, if we're, we've got these underlying insecurities and issues that we're facing, it has an effect on our business and how we're able to show up in business.
Yeah, 100%. So when clients come to you, or these moms are coming to you wanting, business advice, but life advice, but business advice, where are the areas that you see maybe people coming to you the most for, or maybe you're figuring out as, through conversations or through working with them, like these are actually the biggest underlying issues that I have seen come to me that women have questions.
Mm. I think it's predominantly the foundational pieces to business. It's, what are your values, and looking at the things that are most important to you and then aligning yourself with those values. And that's helpful in life, but of course
Yeah.
in business as well. And
Yeah.
I think it's being able to really prioritize your life and business to suit you and you only. And I
Mm,
think one area that I definitely see clients getting stuck in is feeling like they should do certain things. They need to fit these certain molds. They should be doing this. They should be doing that. I heard from somebody that I need to follow this strategy. And it's like sometimes we need to peel back all of these layers and be like, okay, let's focus on you. What do you want? What are you trying to achieve? And let's help you get there in a way that you want to. I'm really big on being able to do business our own way because I don't believe there's one way only. I don't believe there's a cookie cutter approach to business where this is what you need to do. I think that you can make business work for you. And I definitely for me and my clients, I like to look at business as something that you are fulfilled in and passionate about, but something that fits your lifestyle as opposed to you having to fit into having a business as a lifestyle. So it's like having a lifestyle that suits you, and then your business can work around that. And so looking at boundaries that you need to set in place to be able to have that business be successful, but then also still enjoy your life. I think sometimes we can get really caught up in business, that we spend so much time and energy and focus in the business area that sometimes we let our life go to the side a little bit. We let our health lack, or we let relationships or socializing go, because we're so focused on business. And I mean, there's always going to be seasons where there's time and place where our focus really will be our business for a little while, but it's trying to find this flow between the two. And I think getting clear on your values and aligning yourself to those values is a really big key. But then it's also putting boundaries in place so that way you can really look after your time and your energy and put it to where you want it to be. But it's interesting. I think sometimes clients will come to me for certain things in business, and it's interesting what they walk away with, because they're like, I worked through so much stuff I didn't even realize was there. And I think that's the interesting part, because even as coaches, we still need coaches in our life to help us shine a light on those areas that we can't see, and sometimes get that different perspective that sometimes we've just got our blinkers on and we're completely blind to.
Oh, 100%. There's been so many times that I've walked away from a coaching conversation, even in like a mentorship or like a mastermind, like a small group setting, where I'm like, Kim, we would be discussing something else, but I'm applying it to something, in my life or another part of my business, or I hear a question asked to even someone else in the group, and then I apply it to it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, aha, like that's a huge, huge moment. So I 100% agree with that. So let's talk boundaries, because I feel like that is a huge thing. And I feel like, especially for women, especially probably for moms, how do you even go about setting boundaries? Like, I know you're big on your purpose and really finding your why, your values, your mission. I'm assuming you start there. But if you have someone who's, a busy mom, or maybe even still working a full-time job and also trying to build a business, what are some of those basic or maybe even small steps that you can take to start setting some of those boundaries so that you can have some of that freedom that you were talking about?
It's a really big one, because I know what that life business juggle is like. I mean, there was definitely a time where I was still in a 9-to-5 job, juggling a business and juggling kids. And like, that juggle is real. The time that constraints we have when we're doing all of these things, it's a real thing. I mean, sometimes I feel like people can use, not having enough time as an excuse. But the reality is, if you are juggling all of these things at once, you really don't have a lot of time. And so I think having boundaries in place really helps with that. So it allows you the ability to try and juggle all of these things at once. And, I think it's getting really clear on what is important to you. What do you have the capacity for? And let's see how we can make this work for right now. And so sometimes it is putting boundaries in place of, I need to spend the evening working on my business because that's the time that I have available to me, and being really clear on, this is my boundary of, I'm going to spend this time on work of an evening, and then letting the washing sit there, letting, all of these things go. And I think sometimes it's also dealing with the guilt that we have as well, where we feel guilty that we are spending time dedicated to something, and then we feel like we're letting other things go. But it's getting clear on what is most important to you, and then how can we make that work. And I think boundaries around time is probably the biggest thing that I work on with my clients, because the time factor is something that we are all dealing with. We've all only got 24 hours in a day, and we're all leading such busy lives. Like, that's just the reality of it too. We've all got a lot on our plate. And so looking at how we can create time for the things that we need, and then communicating that with the people we need to communicate with, whether it's our partners, whether it's children, whether it's people in our team, whoever that needs to be, and letting them know that this is moving forward, this is what I'm going to be doing, and, putting that in place so that way everyone's clear of what you're doing. And then I guess the responsibility then also comes back on you to uphold those boundaries, which I think is an area which is a little bit tricky, because especially if you are somebody who might be a people pleaser or have people pleasing tendencies, it can be really hard to put boundaries in place where you are saying that this is something that I'm doing from here on in, and upholding that. And so I think it's also just being clear, communicating that, and also I think letting people know why. I think that helps as well, especially when it's a time thing. If you're not spending your time doing the things that you normally would with people, I think that letting them know why. So for me, I know when I was juggling the job, the business, and the kids, I would spend my evenings, quite a few of them, dedicated to business. And so I would say to my husband, hey, look, it's really important for me to build this business that I'm wanting to build. And so, I'm going to spend 2 hours of an evening dedicated to the business. So is it, I just need to let you know that this is what's going to be happening, and then putting things in place to enable that to happen as well. And so I think that's been really helpful for me in being able to juggle everything, and just having boundaries that are very clear so I can have that time that I need to. But yeah, boundaries around time seems to be the biggest thing that my clients face, and me too. I mean, I've had to deal with that myself as well, and it's not always easy, but it's like anything, it takes practice. And the more you practice setting some boundaries, the more you practice upholding them, the better you'll get at it. And it'll really help you moving forward in your business as well.
You kind of answered, actually. I was going to ask you about the husband or the partner component, because that is something I've talked about it once or twice on here, but I hear a lot from clients is I don't have a supportive spouse. And I mean, full transparency, I don't have a spouse. So I'm like, I am trying to give advice, but I also have not lived through that. So it's a whole different ballgame than what you were just sharing with, conversations that you had with your husband and having him on board. I'm just curious. Like I said, you kind of touched on this, but if you had a client coming to you and saying, I don't have a supportive spouse on board, so that really puts a big either time constraint or maybe confident, like what advice would you give them to kind of work through that?
Yeah, I actually have had a client in that position, and I think it's actually quite common. So for the listener listening, if you are in that position, know that you're not alone there, because I think that there are many, many people that have faced that, especially in those earlier days. And I think the biggest thing that I would offer there is to really communicate what it is you're wanting to achieve and why. Again, it comes back to that why, but I think getting clear on why you're wanting to achieve this. And I guess also focusing on what the benefits are of you creating this thing, because it's like anything, there is going to be sacrifice in those beginning stages. And, being able to share that this is something I'm passionate about. This is something that is really exciting to me. It's going to light me up. This is something I just have this calling for, and explaining, I think, why you're wanting to do it and what it will achieve, I think will be the biggest breakthrough in helping your partner understand why you're wanting to do this. Because sometimes it comes from a place of just purely and simply not understanding. It might be that you're wanting to invest in a business coach in the starting stage of your business. And, a partner might be like, I don't understand why you want to spend this kind of money. You don't have a business yet, or, that you're going to get these potential things. So I think explaining why you're wanting to do this and what it will help you achieve. And I think quite often, if you are in a family dynamic or a partnership, creating a business, often we go into business because we're wanting, time freedom and flexibility, but also financial freedom. And so it's also explaining that, having this business is a vehicle that's going to allow us XYZ. And I think once you can explain it to a point that your partner's more on board and understanding, they can support you better through that. And I think explaining the importance of how important it is to you, I know for me that I'm fulfilled in my life and, my family and my kids, but my business is a huge part of that too. And it's like, I feel like I wouldn't be my full self without my business aspect to it. And so I think when you can explain that to a partner, I think it just helps them get on board a little bit more. And I think it's like anything, the more as you go about your business and you're able to, take these steps, bring them on board for the journey and the ride, explain what's going on, like let them be a part of it. And I think that really helps, because I know my husband didn't understand the business stuff that I was doing in the beginning. And I think it's been really helpful explaining things along the way, because now he's got this understanding of what I do, but he's also more supportive because he actually gets it. He understands it. And I think that's where the gray area comes in, is when they don't have that understanding. It's hard to be, on board with something they just don't simply understand. And I think that will be really helpful.
That's huge. That's like the best explanation of that I've ever heard, by the way. So if you have been struggling with this, you need to save this episode and rewind it and go back and listen again, especially when you were explaining how you feel about your business and it lit you up and it fulfilled you. And I was like, well, if she was saying that to me right now, I'd be like, yes, do it, girl. Like, do your thing. I don't even need to understand. So I loved that. So yes, absolutely. And I do think it is a lot of times either a lack of communication or, like you said, just lack of understanding. Like, why is it that this is so important and it's taking up our normal time when we watch TV together or we do, XYZ together? On that same note, and side note, if you're watching this on the video, I just had like a coughing attack and I do have a cough drop in. So it's not like I'm like slurping on something. I had lost my voice and it was back today and I was feeling great, and then it just started. So thankfully there's a mute button. So if you're listening to this, you did not see that, but if you're watching live, apologies. But I do think a big thing with time, going back to time and boundaries, and you mentioned a little bit about investing. When is there a point in either your personal business that you started investing either with delegating or business coach, or at what point, is it the right time, or is there a right time? Because I know you do a lot of individualized coaching to start investing, delegating, thinking of ways to work smarter in your business and not you being the only one doing all the things.
This is a really great question. I love that you've asked this. And I don't know if my answer will surprise anyone or not, but I actually think that it is almost imperative to have somebody by your side in business from the beginning. So I know that obviously as a coach, I know how helpful it is to, really help guide a client through their journey and what they're going through to the point of that destination, that goal, that outcome that they're wanting to achieve. But likewise, as a business owner myself, I know that when I've invested in a coach or a mentor, it has been monumentally helpful in my business. It has allowed me to grow at a rate so much faster than I would have been able to do on my own. And I think when we're business owners, we're always faced with blocks, where it's the biggest personal development journey of your life, having a business, because you are constantly forced to work through limiting beliefs that you're facing. You've got to build confidence, you've got to build resilience. Like, there are so many things that we naturally go through in owning a business, that having that coach or mentor by your side to hold your hand, to support you, to help guide you, is just, I cannot even emphasize how important it is. And for me, my gosh, it has been scary sometimes investing in a coach or mentor. Like, I'm not going to lie. There have been times I have invested in a coach and been like, oh my gosh, this is scary. Like, what have I done? And it's interesting because I've always looked back at my end of my time in that container, in that mastermind, whatever it's looked like, and gone, that has paid off tenfold. And whether that's financially, like whether that's, helped my income grow, whether that's I've personally grown throughout that experience of working with that coach, I have never regretted a single investment that I've made in my business. And I think whether you're at the startup phase, whether you're at the growing, the scaling phase, it doesn't really matter what stage of business you're in. I really believe you need that coach by your side. And I think it's also looking at what you're currently experiencing and facing, what in your business you feel like there are leaks, where in your business do you feel you need extra support, or you need to upskill? Where are the areas that you need that significant help with? And then go and source a coach or a mentor or a program that's going to help you work through those things. And that would be my biggest advice. I mean, there's so many different amazing coaches out there. And in working with somebody, I think it's really about finding someone that you resonate with, finding that person that you feel like you connect with, like you feel like they're your kind of person. And I think it's also finding someone, and this is just maybe my own personal belief here, but I think it's important to find someone that's only a few steps ahead of you. And the reason I actually say that is because I feel like they still remember what it's like to be in your shoes. And it's still very clear in their mind what it felt like to be at the stage of business that you might be in. And I feel like it's been more helpful for me when I've worked with someone who feels like they're only a few stages ahead of me. I feel like that has been more beneficial than there have been times I have worked with coaches who are so far beyond me that I feel like sometimes it's not relative as well. So, I think it's my answer to your question really is, I think it's imperative to have a coach or mentor by your side. Equally too, though, I think it's also just as important to have a community of people behind you as well. Quite often in our worlds, in our family, in our friendship dynamics, we might be the only one doing what we're doing. So we can feel so isolated and alone in our experience and journey because we don't have that friend to turn to be like, oh, I was on a Zoom today, da, 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 da. Like, people sometimes don't get what we're doing. And so I also think it's equally important to have a community of people around you who are like-minded, who are in this realm doing what you're doing, to help support you as well, because you just don't feel alone. And I think it's really helpful when you're going through different seasons in business. There's highs and lows in business always. And when you're in those moments, it's nice to have those people to help support and encourage you. And then it's also equally as nice to have people there to really celebrate the things and your successes and your achievements as well.
I love that. I can't agree more with literally everything you said. I was like, yes, yes, yes. Do you have tips for someone listening on where they can find that kind of a community? Because I hear that a lot as well from just a variety of people is, I don't really have anyone in my corner. I don't know where to find people who are like-minded like me, or, on this business journey. Where are some places that people could start looking for that?
Yeah, I think for me, the way I've found, my people has actually been through being in group containers with others. So it's whether it's masterminds, group coaching programs, I have found my people in those kinds of containers. And something that I offer is I have a Mum Boss mastermind session each month where people can come along, and it's a place to be supported, but network and connect with other people. But honestly, it's simply social media. Like, crazy, I know, because it's a place where we're meant to socialize, but I have found and connected with so many incredible people. I mean, Lindsay, you're one of them. Like, you find people online that you're like, you're my kind of person, and you kind of just start chatting with them, and then you can kind of get in their space. But it's interesting. I know my husband often laughs when I say to him, like, oh, I'm just going to jump on a Zoom with one of my friends that I've met online. And he's like, you've met a lot of people online. Like, you've got a lot of online friends. And it's quite funny because it's true. Like, because these people get me a little bit differently to my friends and family, because again, they just don't understand what I'm doing. And so it's nice to be able to find people, whether it's in a container with them, whether it's just online in general. But I think it's quite interesting when you find people on social media that you connect with. You'll be surprised where that kind of leads you.
Oh, 100%. It's so funny. My dad, actually, I'm going to, it's like a mastermind weekend, but it's with a group of people that I met online. And my dad's like, wait, so you've never actually met these people in person and you're sharing a house with them? And I'm like, yeah, like it's like to me, it's like not weird, but to
Yeah.
him, he's like, this is like major stranger danger. I'm like, well, I've met a couple of them in person now at this point, but like, no, I don't know everyone going. But
It's
yeah,
so interesting, isn't it? Because it's like some of the connections I've made online, I have been, friends with these people for a couple of years now. And I feel like they know me so deeply, and yet we've never met in person. And I know the concept is so foreign. Like you sit here and you think this sounds so crazy, but it's how you find your people. And it's really nice to have that. And I think it's actually really nice to have that outside of your circle of people too. I think it's nice to have these people that you can go to and talk about things that are outside of your world as well. So yeah, I'm
well,
all about connection and community.
yeah, and I love that you mentioned like a variety of different groups in a variety of different ways. Um, because I was in a group, I guess it's kind of like a group coaching program, probably the first one I was in. And then when I left it, because a lot of people were continuing, but like you mentioned with finding a coach, I really saw the value in working with someone who was doing what I was doing, but like you said, we're just a few steps ahead of me
Mm.
because I was experiencing that working with, these people making millions of dollars. Like my business isn't there yet. So I realized in some of our coaching sessions, like some of the things that were, I don't know, recommended. I'm like, I don't really know that works with an audience my size or, my vibe of people or what I'm used to doing. So I was finding a lot of that disconnect. So anyway, when I left that group, and went to, I joined another small group and networked with people there and worked with people business there and collaborated there. And then I've, done another one and like different ones. I have found so much value in that because I'm like, my network is so large now from participating in all those different containers, and some of them I renewed. I'm not I'm not a chronic like coach hopper, but I do think there is something really big to be said for that kind of diversity and widening your net versus just staying closed in with a small group and never branching out and seeing what else is out there.
Mm. Oh, absolutely. I think it's incredible what these connections can bring. I mean, like I said, you and I connected online and here we are now, and you're coming on my podcast too. So it's like,
Mhm.
it's funny how these connections can unfold. But yeah, I do definitely feel that getting yourself out there and amongst other people is so needed,
Yeah.
and it's just for your own personal development and growth as well. And I think sometimes it's just when you, especially if you work from home in this online capacity that we work in, it can feel isolating and alone. Like right now, I'm sitting here by myself, like I'm on here with you, but like in
Yeah.
my world, I'm here by myself. And so it's really nice to just have that community and connection that
Yeah.
we might otherwise feel is lacking. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a big advocate for going out there and finding your people. And I think putting yourself in those containers is a really great way to do it, because you're putting yourself with like-minded people. If you are in a container that's, for a particular topic or whatever it might be, those people in that container are probably going to be your kind of people.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. 100%. So much value here. Well, I could talk to you forever, but we do not have time for that. That's part of our time management boundaries tip that we had earlier in the episode. But I do have a couple follow-up questions that I like to ask. And we've talked a lot about personal development in this episode. So I would love to know either a current personal development book you're reading or maybe one that you read that had a huge impact on you. And I know it's hard just to pick one. You
Mm.
can pick two if you want, but
Yeah. It's funny when you ask these questions, because sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, but as soon as you ask this, I was like, I know the book I want to say already. And it's not business related.
okay.
So little shocker there, but it's not.
Okay.
So it's The Five Regrets of the Dying. And
Okay.
that book was one of the most transformational books I have ever read. It really, I think, put into perspective what's important to you. It helped you look at your own values, what's important to you. Yeah, that was a book that I honestly feel like every single person needs to read. If we could get that in schools, in high schools, I mean, it needs to go everywhere. That's an incredible book. And I think because, yes, it's a personal development book, but it'll make you think about your business as well. It'll make you think about the impact and legacy that you want to leave behind as well. So that's definitely the book I recommend.
I've heard of it before. I have not read it. So now I feel like I have to read it.
You need to read it.
Like really powerful words about it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Morning or night routine, or neither or both?
Both.
Okay.
I'm quite a routine person. I feel like having structures in place really helps with my time, but also just helps me be the best version of me for my family, but also for my clients as well. So I'm big on having both, but not strict. I'm not about strict routines.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like that too. I'm like, I want a little bit of flexibility with my routine.
Yeah. I don't get the whole like wake up at 5, go to the gym, do this, do that. Like I'm more like an intuitive person. So it's like, you know, I have a morning and night routine, but I check in with like, what do I need in this moment and work with that.
That's so good. Yeah. Okay. And last question. This one's just more a fun one and just me being curious. Favorite vacation spot, either that you have gone to or that you dream of going to and you know it's going to be amazing?
Okay, so this would definitely be my husband and I, before having children, we went on a cruise, and it was from Australia because that's where I'm based, and we went all around the Pacific Islands, so like Fiji, Vanuatu. That was just a dream holiday, and I hope to do that very, very soon.
Oh my gosh, I hope to do that very, very soon. That sounds awesome.
It was amazing.
Yeah, and I've never been to Tanzania, or not Tanzania, Tasmania. I have been to Tanzania. I'm like, wrong country, wrong continent. But I have been to Australia, and I loved Australia. I think we talked about that when we chatted before, and I loved that. So I hope to go back there someday. So
yes, come on down.
Yeah, that was one of my top places I've ever visited. So that would have been on my list for sure. Have you ever been to the United States?
I haven't. It's funny because my husband and I, we looked at different travel places right before I fell pregnant. And then we're like, well, travel plans might have to go on hold for a little bit now.
Just a little bit of time. Love it. Well,
yes, one day.
A house in Ohio. I'm in Ohio. I don't know if it's a big tourist spot, but you always have a place here to stay if you ever want to.
Likewise.
Thank you so much. Tell us how we can connect with you, all the listeners. And guys, I will put all this in the show notes, and all the links will also be added to all the videos.
Yeah, so my favorite place to hang out is Instagram. Connection is one of my highest values, so I love connecting with people on Instagram. So you'll find me at Renae.O'Neill. Jump into my DMs, say hi, let me know that you've watched this and what your biggest takeaway was. And then I have my own podcast as well, the Mum Boss Podcast, which our beautiful Lindsay is going to be our guest on, which I'm super excited about jumping on the mics again together. Yeah. But yeah, Instagram is probably the best place to find me, and you can connect with me there and see what I'm all about.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Renae. This has been so helpful. I know there's lots of nuggets in here. Like I said, this is definitely one that everyone's going to want to save and repeat and listen to again. But thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much. I've loved being on here.